we really appreciate your time in meeting with us.
Yeah. I hope I can be helpful. I don't know if I can or not, but I'll try.
Yes, you were in the forum that we had. There was some questions that you did answer for us, and it felt like we kind of ran out of time. So we have those remaining questions about the equity curriculum.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that we acknowledge that you are an interim superintendent, and you didn't put in place many of these things. And it was like the train was going, and then you hopped on, and here you found yourself. But, at the same time, it is what you signed up for, and there you are sitting in that seat. Yeah. So you are the one that we have to come to with these questions. So, with that, then, like I said, the questions that we have today are regarding the remaining questions are regarding the equity plan. And just to provide the basis, what we had talked about before, and the district has been very clear that the reason for that is that the district has identified disparities between races with the student scores, and like I said before, we commend the district on identifying students that have need, students of color, specifically Black and Hispanic, lower academic scores than Asian and white students, and then there's also disparities with disciplinary action. Am I right with that?
You keep going.
Okay. So far, though, those are the disparities.
Those are some of the areas that there's been concern. I think some of the perceptions and some of the actual data probably vary depending on who you talk with. We try to rely on the summary evaluations from what's called the ISASP. And I know you have children in the school, so you're familiar with that, and you obviously as a teacher were familiar with that. We try to look at that and the map type data, the more frequent, and then of course the reporting we're required to do with the Department of Ed. So those sorts of big picture items, we would see gaps that we believe we ought to be able to try to close.
Yeah, absolutely, and I wholeheartedly support that as well, and that's consistent with what I have seen presented at school board meetings, etc. And so how the district has approached that are what we have questions about. The 802 bill, you're familiar with it.
Very much so, yes.
And so I have the slide up here, just that curriculum, and whether it's staff training or anything in the school district, it is prohibited to assign characteristics to people based on those demographic variables like race, gender, ability, religion, etc. So there's no assigning of fault or blame or bias to a particular race or sex. And that's consistent with what you're understanding?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
And watching the equity plans and the workshops, viewing the slides. I have been a part of the family equity trainings and gotten to have those videos from those meetings. And the question then is asked, if we're going to address the problem, we have disparities between students of different races. Why do the disparities exist? I agree, we have to understand that in order to design an intervention successfully. What was explained by Dr. Jones is that what we want to avoid is deficit thinking in solving this problem, and we want to have a critically conscious approach to solving the problem. And he explained that deficit thinking is assigning fault of the disparities to things like the single parent home, lack of parent involvement, family income, and instead that the problem is with the system. It's with the educators themselves, the biases of the teachers, that teachers perhaps don't have high enough expectations. Am I understanding correctly that that's...
Those are, on both sides, I'd say, are sets of hypotheses that we encounter. I'm sure you've encountered them. I certainly have. I don't think that we have the sophistication in any single case necessarily to know exactly which of the factors are causing the most impact on a situation. But what we can do is take a research base and think about if a child typically we can achieve at this level and we aren't there, here are things we know from effective instructional practices that have been helpful, proven over and over that they work. And that's what we're trying to gear towards. At the same time, recognizing we all sit within a society that might have some of these thoughts, and we're trying to raise awareness that there could be lots of places that unintentionally we're getting these outcomes. So if there's something we can do as a system, obviously that would cause the least disruption to an individual child or a family. We want to correct that as a system. At the same time, we try to support our educators and all of us within the system to focus on research-based methods and strategies and not make assumptions that we don't know if they're true or not. So yes, I think this list represents on both sides common themes that we hear, and we're just trying to get individuals to say, kid by kid by kid, where are they in comparison to our standards, and how can we help either through support to our teachers or through cooperative work with families, children thriving. You know, that's really what we're about. So
I agree, and I don't see anything inconsistent with the law and what you just said. I do see a gap between what you've just communicated and then what is communicated by Anthony Jones in the critical consciousness trainings. So if you could help shed some light on that. So Anthony Jones, Jessica Sidler, they've done a number of
it's our equity
sessions.
Staff.
Yes, and so what he explained is that critical consciousness is the willingness or ability to see how power and privilege are at work to systematically advantage some, and then he does define who some are, and we've got that coming up in some other slides as well.
Okay.
And while simultaneously disadvantage others. So critical consciousness, it's specific, not just about helping all children, but it's about identifying the people that have power and privilege, and that evidently they are working to disadvantage and oppress others in the system itself.
Well, I recognize that these definitions are several out there, and I'm sure you all have, as I have, tried to educate myself on what's available and multiple authors, and they all approach it a little bit differently. You know, as a school district, I'm not aware that we've landed on any one definition, but try to say our goal is to get the viewpoint, if you will, at a higher level of awareness. And I would certainly acknowledge among us as educators, we probably have varying philosophies of what is most effective in getting to that ultimate goal, which is students thriving. And I recognize those are my words.
Yeah.
Others might say them differently. I do think that's one of the, I'll call it improvements of our own system. You know, I've been here, as you said, a short time, and I'll be leaving very quickly. So it's just one person and one person's point of view. But I think we have to ask ourselves, if our goal is children and their growth and development, how can we be most effective with families, children, our educators that we can't do our job without, getting to that ultimate goal?
Yeah.
And be willing to have that dialogue and push and pull, if you will, about the most effective strategies. Yeah. And so I totally acknowledge among us, and my experience over this 12 months has been, we set at different points in our hypotheses about what's effective. And I think some of these statements, I don't know any of these individuals personally, so I can't really...
Wait, you don't know Dr. Jones?
I don't know.
He said these words exactly.
I don't know any of these references, those individuals.
But Dr. Jones is the one that said it, and Jessica Sidler.
Okay.
They've said it, but you know them.
I know them.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, I think they maybe would, and I haven't asked them this question, but I think they would say that maybe fits with where they are in their hypotheses.
Okay.
I think among us as a school district, we probably have maybe wider variation than you might expect about, is that the way we all think is the best way to get the best outcomes for students? I'm going to guess we could have a pretty lively debate.
I agree. I bet there are a range of views. So what I'm trying to get to the bottom of is this consistent with 802? To say that, and there's more coming here. I mean, if you want to chew on it for a second, to say that some people specifically have power and privilege, and you heard me play the audio at the last, and I have it here as well, I can play it, but Dr. Jones said that specifically.
And you know, again, I won't try to speak for him. I do think he probably truly believes in his life's experiences, that he's observed that. I must say, I think I'm more aware now than I might have been in sometimes in my history, that it does appear that there are times when, with the best of intentions, we have systems that perhaps are easier for some to navigate than others. So I acknowledge that. I don't know if that's the actual belief of Dr. Jones or not. I recognize that he pulls from some of those sources.
So it actually doesn't matter if it's his belief, but what the law is can you teach it as curriculum, which is what's being done.
Let's talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. And quite honestly, it's new enough that I suspect I don't know everything there is to know about it yet, but I think we certainly are trying. But so a question that we're wondering in our own minds is, just because we might have a reference like this, is that in and of itself a violation of 802? Or is it if I'm the classroom teacher and I say, Kira, this is the only definition there is of critical consciousness? That to me, I would worry is probably bumping up against the requirements of 802.
Yeah.
But if I say, here are a couple sources of critical consciousness, I put a couple more resources in front of you and say, here's some others. What do you believe fits your experience, or what raises curiosity for you about these definitions, and why do you think someone maybe would say that? You know, so if you introduce it as material and part of critical thinking, or trying to get individuals to use their own set of thoughts, then I'm not so sure that it would violate.
Yeah, I totally agree. So if you teach it in the way that here's one view, here's another view, what are everyone's thoughts?
Yes.
The way this is taught is dogmatically that this is most certainly true. And so that answers my question, that the way this is taught is not consistent with 802 because it is dogmatically taught.
Let me push some more.
Okay, sure.
The other thing we've been really careful about is to say, here is a set of trainings you are invited and even encouraged to participate in. You're not required, because 802 specifically talks about you can't explicitly make a statement, and you cannot require. I think maybe one of our discoveries as a school system over this year is our need to continue to help staff understand how important it is to have that choice, to be very explicit and upfront with families, and certainly with our secondary students even. I mean, they're of an age that they should have some choice too, I would hope. And even our own staff, that any of these, I'll call them sensitive topics, potentially controversial topics, that there's not a requirement. And so we have not required any of this. We've certainly made it optional. And even among our own conversations, as I mentioned earlier, we get into some pretty lively debates about, is this the best approach given that outcome? So I understand the questions, and I understand the push towards us to say, are you sure? I think we still are learning, but it is absolutely our intent not to require and not to be just absolutely dogmatic.
Okay, so I think I got it now. So it is inconsistent with 802, but because you haven't required it, then it's not a violation, is what you're saying.
I think depending on how you use the information is going to determine whether or not it violates 802. The information itself, I would wonder. I don't have any basis to know other than people's interpretations. And of course, we are in consultation with legal counsel. I think a lot of people are, to make sure we are upholding the law. That is absolutely our intent, is to uphold the law.
Okay, so just not to belabor the point, to take another view and consider other, or I would say additional solutions in the way the district has addressed the problem. Because again, I just want to start from the foundation that we agree that students that are below benchmark should have supports in place for them, and so we both agree on that.
Great.
So one thing that I asked you for was, with the ISAS scores, the districts reported the means, and I had emailed you to ask you about, well, can I see the range of scores? Can you tell me more about, what is the percentage by race of students in ELP, extended learning? How about, what is the percent of students below benchmark, so that we could get a full picture of the data instead of just, and you replied to me that you checked. You checked with your data person.
I did.
And that person said that they did not have that available, and that if I wanted that data, I would have to pay for it, and because it is not already compiled.
Yeah. There's probably some of it, Kira, from past years. Some of our data gets reported to the Department of Ed, and they do sorts of analyses. It usually lags about a year. So there's probably some there, depending on what you are wanting to try to find, that may be on our state report card site, etc. We didn't have the information the way you explicitly asked for it. And of course, we just finished retesting, and we'll be getting a new set of data. But if there's information we can provide that we have, obviously we will. It's public information. We turn it in. But I don't know if it was, and I don't say that I'm an expert. I hopefully understand a lot of this data, but I'm not a data person. They didn't feel like the way it was asked that they had those reports put together. And so, again, if you wanted time to rework those questions or be real specific.
I would love to meet with Aaron Meeks even, and be able to have a chance to.
I'd say if you could make that request in June. Right now we're just in the middle of trying to pull the end of the year.
Okay. I thought you meant because you'll be gone then.
No. Hey, I'll still be here in June.
Okay.
But any way that we could refine that, because we're not trying to withhold information. We're not trying to cost people money. But it is her time. We just have one of her, and we really have her tied up. In the administration and the compilation right now, but okay. I mean, if you could be clear
check back in June. I got it.
Clear of the purpose that you're trying to get after, even and
and so this is what I'm trying to get after. Actually, is if we only look at averages. It is a very unclear picture. There are outliers.
It skews everything.
And negatively, positively skewed. It could be even that there are more students of color that are above benchmark, but that there are some outliers that are below, and then it skews the average. So we don't know.
Yeah. Well, obviously, you understand data at a pretty deep level, and our system, it seems, has used that kind of average for a lot of years, and maybe is still developing their sophistication of digging into what does that mean. And we all know, I love the example someone told me once about, if the average house price in your neighborhood is $100,000, you probably feel pretty good about that until you realize it also contains Bill Gates' home. And then you think, oh, that changes the picture a lot. If the average is $100,000 and we have a multi-million-dollar property in there, you really haven't told a very clear picture at all. So, the average doesn't work very well for informing a lot of things. So.
Yeah, well, I was mainly concerned that the data analyst that's been hired for the district doesn't look at ranges, that only looks at the average. So that's what my primary concern was.
I think she understands data at a really deep level. Mm-hmm. I think we as a system have been remiss at saying, what does it really tell us? And I observed as I came in last fall, they were beginning to have those kinds of data conversations at the building level, et cetera. I don't have that concern any longer, but historically, I do think just reporting that average wasn't as robust of a picture as you would hope it might be. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let me skip ahead here. What we have gathered as we have tried to learn more, Sadrac as someone who has worked in the district and myself as a parent, and ever since COVID I have started to pay more attention because I learned through that there was curriculum being taught that I have found concerning. And so once again, that the foundation is that we share the same concern, but the means to achieve closing that equity gap is why we're here today. Okay. And what we've noticed, what it appears is that part of the district's equity plan is there's 3 things that we've identified. There's probably more, but the 3 things that we wanted to ask about more today was identity mapping, critical consciousness training, and then the new curriculum that was passed yesterday. So Sadrac specifically had questions about the identity mapping.
So like a couple of weeks ago, Jessica sent out an article titled White Privilege Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack.
Yes.
So the article identifies whites and males as privileged. Can you tell us more about how this concept works to achieve equity?
Yeah. Again, Sadrac, there are so many resources out there, and I'm sure you saw it even as you were in the classroom teaching. That's where I think it's so critical for us to keep supporting teachers in their growth of good questioning techniques, centering their lessons on essential questions and standards. An article by itself probably doesn't raise my level of concern that much if I know it's taught in a inquiry manner. If it is not taught in an inquiry manner, then that's where I'd have my concerns. So I get, and you can go in any number of national publications and find writers that have taken a stand.
You're right. It was not just an isolated article. It was in the context of identity mapping this activity. So.
And that, if I understand correctly, that's from when Ms. Sidler was in the classroom about 3 years ago.
I got this from a teacher that said it was done last year.
Okay. I did not ask firsthand. I asked her supervisor about this, and their belief was it was from 3 years ago.
We'll let that pass by because this is something that is current that she did just send out, and this was a part of the the family equity trainings. Why teach about identity? And it's just the same topic. It also has explains about what intersectionality is, and that we all have dominant versus, it depends on who you are. There are dominant identities as part of your social identity. There are the non-dominant, and they are identified as oppressor versus oppressed. This was an activity, this map of myself that Jessica Sidler sent out, which is exactly the same thing as the photo that you saw, that you looked into.
All right.
And so it's filled out my identity, and then put either a P in this column for that's a privileged part of your identity, or an M for makes you marginalized or oppressed.
Okay.
And so this is just, yet again, to do this activity with kids or even staff. This has been a part of the critical consciousness trainings. I'm just curious how this labeling of demographic variables is consistent with 802.
I'm not sure if it's labeling here as much as it is. And again, I'm not teaching it, but my hypothesis on this is it's trying to help each of us think about what is our view of ourselves, so that we might understand, well, that's how I think about it. I wonder how Kira thinks about it, or I wonder how the next person. So I don't see that in violation of 802, but rather trying to explore and raise one's awareness. But I'd have to watch the lesson to see how was it presented. And I do get the inquiry under it where you're saying, are we sure that our staff are trying to use that broad-based, multiple sorts of examples approach? I have pretty high confidence in our staff. Obviously, I can't be in every classroom, and I don't have 100% confidence, but that certainly is the goal we are working towards, just trying to move wherever we are along the continuum of helping students find their own voice and be comfortable with however I fill that out. I'm sure my chart would end up looking different from how you would fill it out, and trying to build sensitivity to there's nothing wrong with me viewing myself differently than you might view yourself or the next person. So trying to build towards that awareness and acceptance. I believe that's the underlying purpose here. But again, I haven't seen it taught, so I don't have firsthand knowledge.
Did you want to talk on a little bit how you've experienced it being taught?
Well, what I was thinking about, like I talked here before, when I saw this chart, the previous one, I was like, if it's being taught in a classroom, to kids, I completely disagree with. If my child was there, I will go and complain. I try to teach my daughter who she is, like you said. We all see ourselves different.
Right.
My daughter is, my wife is white and I'm Hispanic.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So, but I don't tell her like your mom is this, I'm here. No, you are who you are. You know, and I don't try to tell her like you are going to be marginalized or you're going to be oppressed. I don't teach any of those things to my daughter. And as a parent, as a teacher, I don't think that those things should be, be spoken about in the classroom. Because I think about if I start teaching my daughter about those things, she's already to grow up with this, mentality of I'm not better than the white people. Or my friends that are white are, have better opportunities than me. Yeah. So I'm just like, I'm not doing that to my daughter, because she's going to have all of the opportunities as anybody other, kid of color, as long as she, like I told you before, as long as you work hard, like I did, I am where I am because all of the work I did, not because of my skin color, but, all the studies that I did, all of the night that I stay up, late working on something. That's what I accomplished by my, the knowledge that I have, not because of my skin color. So when I see this, I go back and I'm like, this is not okay in a classroom. Yeah. And I don't know if it was 3 years ago or last year, but even if it was 3 years ago, with law or no law, we shouldn't be doing this.
I love listening to what you're describing, because that's very much, I think, the way that I was raised was. You get to choose how much effort you want to put in, that has a big, input on where you can go and how you meet your goals. At the same time, I think about, I probably was never even thinking about, is there something I can do from my point of view? But I think I could have benefited, Sadrac, with awareness that because I had the experience I had doesn't mean somebody else might not have seen that differently. I wouldn't want this to be an example where we told people how to think about themselves. but reflecting on where they think they are and anything that might have an implication for, what might I do differently? It raises some interesting questions in my mind, too, about what could we do as a system that your look at this as a parent, how could we get better at helping you know what's coming so that you could have a conversation? Because I don't believe the intent here would be to try to assign, well, you have to think, if you're this skin color, you have to think this, or if you are this circumstance, you have to think that. But if it raised those questions for you as a parent, how could we have that conversation and make sure we're working as a team, school and family and student? And I think that's probably my biggest takeaway this year is we probably haven't made it as easy as maybe we could. You know, some of these new materials are more online. I'm hopeful that that gives parents more opportunity to engage ahead of. You would hope this wouldn't become a surprise and somehow be viewed negatively, but that's just where my thinking is now.
Thank you.
Yeah, right. No, I appreciate hearing your point of view because I would have looked at that differently, but I can also see where you'd say, how will this be used? And because it raises questions.
Right. Yeah. And you know, and if this is being taught to kids, then you already put a thought in their mind and they start thinking that way. But if they don't know that, then they're just like, I have all of the opportunities that everybody has, you know, instead of like, oh, now that is in my brain, in my mind. Now, I mean, even me as an adult, I hear things out there and then I put it in my mind. It's like those things, those thoughts start like to block me and not letting me, you know, push forward or, you know, go the next step because it's like, well, they said this about me, so I'm not sure about that now. And that's my concern too. Like, if the kids hear these thoughts, these ideas, you know, like they might block themselves already. I'm talking, you know, as my personal experience and my daughter, like she's that way. She hears something and it's like, no, I can't because X person said this. It's like, excuse me? No, little one, come here, we're going to talk, you know? And as a parent, that's what I do.
That's awesome. I feel so grateful for my own parents. They were so strong in saying, don't let yourself be defined or determined by your friends or someone around you. You know, you have to set your own goals and aspire towards them. And so quite honestly, I probably didn't maybe even give enough thought to some of those other factors because I was so strongly taught you get to set your goals and determine your own effort and those sorts of things. But that helps me understand where some of the concern might come from.
And I mean, those are my ideas. I'm pretty sure the other parents see this. You know, they will have other concerns.
Right.
So,
So, and actually, I wholeheartedly support what you said, too. And I think that's consistent with 802, which is that I decide who I am. I talk with my kids. And as a family, we define who they are. And not... even their teacher doesn't tell them who they are. And it's not based on what you look like, which is why, again, this is within the context of that activity. It says dominant groups, and then they defined all of the dominant groups: male, white, English-speaking, Christian. Those are all dominant, and it said those people are privileged in these activities. And then it says these dominant groups set parameters within which subordinates operate. And the subordinates were the minoritized groups. So not white, female, English as second language, etc. And so just like Sadrac, I have 2 daughters. I would never want someone to teach my daughters that it's a disadvantage to be a woman. Look at you, the superintendent of this school. As you know, and so exploring, perhaps in a literacy class, writing about who you are, absolutely. But to present these ideas of dominant group having advantages and privileges,
I would hope they would take that and say, do you think that is the way it is? And have you had experiences? Or do you wonder why in the world we have those sorts of notions? Because gosh, I remember doing my dissertation actually, and they wanted me to do the whole literature review on all the reasons why women were disadvantaged. I was working with some ACT data at the time. And I remember being so perplexed by that, going, I've never felt disadvantaged.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I didn't know I was supposed to be. So it is, I totally get the conversation here, and you're just making me think more and more we've got to provide information with our staff about how important it is to design lessons that keep the questions open as opposed to drawing a conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
No, I hear what you're saying.
Because it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we teach
Mm-hmm.
you're in a minoritized group, you're disadvantaged, then they can take on that identity and live it out.
Yeah.
Instead of
a premise I want to buy into.
Right.
That's what I hear you saying. Okay. No, that's interesting to reflect on.
And the longer we have this conversation, I feel more and more like we agree with what we agree with what you're saying is as far as an approach to identity and supporting students, and based on our experiences as parents and then what Sadrac has reported working in the district, everyone doesn't use the approach that you are saying. And again, I understand you can't be in every classroom across the district.
No, but what we can help set the direction.
Okay, and what advice do you have for us as we encounter these things?
Here's some encouragement, and I'm going to want to ask that same question back to you. I've begun to have some transition type conversations with our new superintendent. I'm pretty impressed, I gotta say. Individual with great experiences, a long history in dealing in big systems. My sense so far is that he very much appreciates the notion of making sure we keep that give and take across our work on equity, to the point that I'm not certain how much he will want to exactly stay on the same path. I think he'll want to learn. He seems like one that's not going to just come and make immediate changes, but will want to learn. I would anticipate you see some shift in the district approach. That's just Paula's opinion, for whatever it's worth.
Praise God.
But my advice would be do exactly what you've done for me, which is ask questions, be willing to meet, be willing to dialogue. To me, if we can sit, understanding we're all part of a community, we really do want the same things, I think, and share examples and raise questions with each other so we could give and take and think about, so what's that implication? That's really helpful. I think he will really benefit from that. I also have to acknowledge, and I recognize, any group of people, you've got a continuum. We've got 700 employees. I imagine we sit at every possible point along that continuum, right?
Yeah.
So how can we have the most influence with the biggest number, always appreciating there are some that sit on the extremes? I think that's the path we're on as a district. I hope that's where we continue. But it'll take conversation, it'll take questions, it'll take acknowledging sometimes we just aren't going to see things the same way. That doesn't upset me very much. I think I sometimes learn the most when someone has a very different point of view. But that would be my encouragement, is take the time, let Dr. Lawson get settled in, have a little bit of context, but continue the questions. But let me flip that. What advice would you have, or hopes, that maybe, I have 8 weeks left. What influence might I be able to have in that 8 weeks, or connections that maybe I could make as we're going through this transition that would help some of the concerns you all have.
Yeah, I feel like I really like your words. I really like the things that you just shared. As a teacher, I see myself, like you said, there are 700 teachers in the district, and we all are in different points, different,
of course,
completely. But can we, I will say, use the expression agree to disagree, because I'm speaking as a teacher, and something that was done to me. And there are a lot of teachers within the district that don't agree with those things, but they are afraid of speaking or saying something because then, they saw my experience and they're like, well, I need this job. So can they be, or can we see, something like we are going to share our thoughts and nobody's going to be, put on the hot chair, and we're going to talk to you strictly, and you don't do those things, and just let them share their thoughts, let them share their ideas, because like you said, it's 700 of them, and they all agree or disagree on different things, and that should be understanding, and not like, okay, Kira, I'm not your friend no more, and I don't want to talk to you anymore. Or like somebody calling you from district office telling you, I need you to come here because you said something, and you are you are opposing to the things that we're trying to do in the district. So we need to talk. Or you agree with this, or you find something else to do.
I don't think you will find, my sense, it's just my opinion, I don't think you're going to find that heavy hand or hammer type approach with Dr. Lawson. That certainly has not been my impression at all.
And that's why I'm happy, I'm happy. I'm outside of the district already, and I'm happy where I am. I'm not trying to come back. But it's like the teachers that are here, that's good for them to hear this, that, okay, so I can share my thoughts, I can share my beliefs, and then everything will be okay with me, my job, and my circle of friends within each building.
And if we can push on each other, I can't sit in your shoes, and just like you can't sit in mine, but I can certainly learn from you. And, if we can have that dialogue, and even with our members of our staff that I know I differ in my point of view from where they are, I'm curious about why is this the approach they are choosing to take, and why do they think it's essential? Because I want to keep reassessing my own thinking. Am I on the right path? Have I missed something I need to learn more about? And that's why I get so excited about education. But that, again, that's where all three of us share that passion. I'm sure. Okay.
I like that idea. And, when I said what I said a long time ago, like Jessica Siller sent me a bunch of information. Read this. I read it. I still disagree with what, what's being done in the district. And that's what I'm trying to go to. Like, I read it, Jessica, but I still disagree. Can we keep moving on, and... Yeah. Well,
and, Kira, I don't happen to know your children, but as a parent, we need families along with us and raising the questions. And, it seems to me if we can keep finding ways to make sure our staff have time to have the conversations with families, I should be able to accommodate a pretty wide range of students, right? I mean, that's my job as an educator. I hope we just keep getting better at that. Again, that's what, while I may or may not agree with everything in the new curriculums that are adopted, the fact that they are online for the most part, I see that as overwhelmingly positive for us.
You mean the fact that they're available for us to see? Okay. Well, that actually, since you asked, what could I do in your remaining time here, that I had that right on my list. Was the new curriculum that was adopted yesterday, and I know that you were emailed some of the concerns, the screenshots.
The links, they go all over the place. And we have asked for guidance from legal counsel again to say, to what extent do these links create an issue of concern for us? Because with the internet anymore, it is absolutely infinite. out there.
So the links that are in specifically the EL curriculum for 6-8, you're saying that you've noted that those are not consistent with 802. Because, I mean, I could just rattle off a few quotes from them.
You and I, again, might interpret that differently. My interpretation right now is that even though I might be uncomfortable and might wish that wasn't what was linked, but it is, as long as I knew that was presented alongside an alternative point of view and the lesson asked for self-thinking or using the data to form my own conclusions, I wouldn't think it would violate 802.
Okay. So the EL curriculum, the website itself says, we are committed to examining how racism lives in each of us as individuals and in the fabric of our organization and its policies, culture, and traditions. So the idea that racism lives in each of us as individuals, I mean, and then it's talking about systemic racism, which again, that's in conflict with 802.
But see, that's their purpose or their description of their own organization.
Right, but their curriculum is based on that.
That's that organization's philosophy.
Yeah.
I don't think I get to tell another organization what they think or don't think. But I also don't see that as a violation today. If
the curriculum's written based on that premise.
See, the curriculum to me is simply a tool.
Okay.
And the instructional strategies and methods are what are going to make it either consistent with 802 or not. And again, that's an area that we are exploring to try to understand. Are we interpreting that accurately? Are we not? That seems to make sense to me, but I want that verified. So again, I appreciate the question. I've had a couple parents raise some of these issues, and so we're seeking more guidance.
Okay, so you are looking into whether or not that is in fact legal.
We're looking into the fact that any given day there are materials and resources that might make statements that we think if that was required or presented as the only point of view, probably push against 802. If they are presented as one piece of material alongside another, I want to know, does that make a difference? You're thinking about that differently.
Well, I guess I agree that it's not that I wouldn't want my children exposed to a range of views, but it's that the curriculum that's been adopted is only, in the content itself, is only one view, and this is a religious view, that racism lives within each of us as individuals. That's a belief system, and I respect anyone's right to religious freedom. Everyone doesn't believe that.
Right.
And so it's not respecting diverse views to teach that.
So I think that's our job, to make sure that we have those diverse views. And this, I think, is not, I don't think that is the curriculum. I think that is the organization's stance.
So you're saying you don't think that the curriculum is written with that commitment in mind?
I think it's definitely written to try to expand exposure to individuals that might have multiple different types of identities and beliefs. Because it's so new and it hasn't been taught yet, I have to just have questions in my mind. I don't think I can have conclusions yet, but I do feel like the intent is to use it in a way that very much would be multiple sources, multiple ideas, multiple sets of choice for families and for students.
Okay.
That's the assurance that I have from our teaching and learning department, and I absolutely believe it's their intent. We've got to be able to support staff that that's where they are. And again, I have pretty high confidence in our staff, high quality members, great intentions. Do we have 100%? That I just can't know. But I can keep asking. So yeah.
The way this is presented, it appears that it's one view.
Okay.
So
that's the concern is that
because I don't see the other views. Do you see what I'm saying in this curriculum as I read and click on it?
Okay.
And so, and I also am unsure. Then it should be taught in like a religions of the world class, if that's because this is a religious view.
The biggest organizer, we are working towards the Danielson framework. You maybe are familiar with that. You may be too, Sadrac. So that framework and those core standards, that's what we absolutely have to teach to. I see these as tools or materials that might help us reach the standards. And the standards, if you've ever looked at them, very much are from multiple points of view. So that's what I believe we have to emphasize as a district. And it gives me hope that whatever set of resources we have to reach those standards, we have to have the multiple points of view. But
Okay, so you're saying that it's consistent with 802 as long as multiple points of view are shared. And it just doesn't happen to be that they're shared within this textbook curriculum.
I don't know the curriculum well enough yet to actually make a claim one way or the other. I absolutely believe it in the approach that will either keep us in compliance.
The approach of the teacher. Okay.
And even the supports of the system, the expectations of the system.
So before you go, you get to the bottom of it because I've read
this.
Well,
we are working on it.
Okay.
Okay. And we'll actually be months into it discovering. And I wouldn't be at all surprised. Here's been my experience through the years with curriculum adoptions. You get so excited because you finally have some resources that you don't have to spend so much time going after. Very true. And then you find out, but when I'm reaching to this standard, it gets me this far, and I've got to still get out this far. So I fully expect we'll continue to see that evolution with this curriculum too. But
okay, and my last hope then, before you go, as you know, I've been trying to meet to learn more about. We've talked about Jessica Sidler, and I've gotten her materials, and I've been reaching out, and she has not replied. So if you could help me connect with her, and then also. If Erin Meeks is the person that does the data, I would love to learn more about that. If you could help connect me with...
I'll do the best I can. I have spoken with Jessica. I don't know where she'll be. I really have never forced someone to meet with someone else if they just didn't want to. I also feel like, if you're going to engage in a certain set of behavior, it has some consequences. So anyway, I'll leave that there. But a person that I wonder, Kira and Sadrac, I don't know if you have worked with Erin Miller very much. Is that a familiar name at all?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. She has such a pivotal role with the curriculum and instruction. I just wonder if it wouldn't be most worth your while, and I'm just thinking out loud, to actually spend a little bit of time with Erin, or, sometimes when we are lucky enough to have community members that are willing to put in quite a bit of time, sitting with us in some of those processes. I mean, I don't know if that'd be of interest to you, but I think I want to have a conversation with Erin Miller to say, how could we best keep the dialogue going? I mean, then we all benefit.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. Well, put my name on that invitation list to join those meetings.
Okay.
I will be there.
Yeah. Well, I will. I'll take your questions and follow up. I'll start with Erin supervises Erin Meek.
Okay.
Erin M. It gets a little confusing, but Erin Miller supervises Erin Meek.
Okay.
Probably will supervise Jessica Sidler in the future. She doesn't now, but we're in that transition phase as Dr. Jones leaves. Yeah. So that's why I'm saying that might be the most effective for you.
Yeah. And just to be clear too, that if a parent has a question about, and I don't know, is Jessica Sidler like an administrator or
She's
just in
not.
general? So I guess I don't know the terminology, but there's no requirement for a staff member to reply to an email or have a meeting.
There probably is not.
Okay.
If it's a open meetings type request or a FOIA type request, we try to be very responsive to those. If it's an general information request, it really does kind of depend on the time of year and our ability to be available. Obviously, I always think, why would you not want to meet? This is why we are here.
It does not seem equitable.
Yeah.
You can report that back.
Okay. All right.
It doesn't seem equitable to just
okay. All right.
reply to some but not others. I mean,
yeah.
Coming from her specifically.
Yeah, I mean,
oh, funny. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So what would happen if we just show up a day that she's here and we just want to talk to her? I'm just wondering,
we're here.
Can we talk to
Remember
Jessica?
the ones that have emailed you 5 times? It's me.
Yeah. Well, I'll keep encouraging.
Okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
We so appreciate your time.
Well, you too. I've always just found just studying and having conversations, you can learn so much. And I'm trying to understand all these different points of view and think about, at the end of the day, how can we all keep focused on kids? Because we have kids in our system that aren't learning, as fast as we'd hope and all of that. But I hear you saying the same thing.
I recognize that, and I am on board. I want to come alongside.
Yeah.
And,
okay.
I had that down the list. I do have some ideas and I could send you the video from our last forum, but I did share some of those ideas that are evidence-based that have been shown to be effective instead of just having a hypothesis and then trying out some things. Actually, there is
evidence.
A
pretty solid research base about a lot of things. So I agree.
Let's use some evidence to approach this problem or the solution, that is. So, did you have any comments?
I was just thinking that maybe we can share those, information that we have with the new superintendent too, and say here's some evidence, and we can use this instead.
Dr. Lawson has been pretty open. I've tried to help link him up with some key communicators in the district that I've experienced. I don't know his availability, can't speak for him, but I certainly will encourage him to sit with you fairly early.
Awesome.
Just to start the dialogue.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's encouraging. Yeah, well, wonderful.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
don't forget your snack.
Poor
Don't forget to eat.
Well, he just knows I'm running from here to another meeting, and I haven't missed very many meals, so
you need to
I
eat
think I'm doing fine. I think I'm doing just fine. So anyway,
well, thank you
all
so
right.
much.
Well, good to see you again. Yeah. I think we'll see each other again, but if not, best wishes, and I've enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you for meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. So.